UK could see more favourable terms.
Yeah, I've certainly read suggestions that, in fact, Boris Johnson sees this actually as a good way of killing off the Brexit issue, but no plans of changing the legislation, which says there will be no extension. Meanwhile, in the US, Donald Trump will unveil guidelines to ease stay-at-home rules today. The president said at the Wednesday press conference that the virus was showing signs of plateauing in some regions.
The battle continues, but the data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. Hopefully that will continue, and we will continue to make great progress.
President Trump earlier held a marathon series of talks with more than 200 business leaders to seek their input on reopening the country. The executives pressed him to dramatically increase testing in order to restore public confidence. Meanwhile, the virus itself has infected nearly 620,000 people in the US, and there are more than 27,000 dead.
The Federal Reserve has issued its latest report card on America's economy. In its beige book released on Wednesday, the central bank says economic activity contracted sharply and abruptly across all regions due to the coronavirus outbreak. Unemployment is up and the outlook uncertain. Information for the Fed's report was collected up to the first week of April. And speaking of the month of April, that of course we're in, Roger, we had some survey data yesterday making things look even worse. So manufacturing in New York State, for example, sentiment among US home builders, that sentiment among home builders plummeting. And this is after, for March, we got retail sales and factory output decimated.
And yet the markets still seem to be, well, looking a little more positively than any of those figures might suggest they should. Right, let's move on to the latest in global news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning to you. Now, you're starting with a closer focus on what's been going on in Europe.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Roger. And we'll start with France, which witnessed its deadliest day as coronavirus deaths spiked, reporting 1,438 yesterday. But the number of intensive care patients dropped for a seventh day. The French Director General for Health said the deaths didn't cover a 24-hour period, as the count included fatalities in recent days that weren't previously reported. In contrast, Germany says it plans to take its first cautious steps to reopening public life, although most measures to fight the coronavirus have been extended to the beginning of May. Bloomberg's Patrick Donoghue has all those details.
Chancellor Angela Merkel said the country's progress in slowing the spread of the sickness was fragile, and that any relaxation must be accompanied by strict hygiene rules and social distancing. Small retailers, car dealerships, bicycle shops, and bookstores can open as early as next week, but restaurants, bars, and clubs will stay closed. Large public events won't happen in Germany until at least August 31st. In Berlin, Patrick Donoghue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Now, here in the UK, government says it will take measures to allow families to say goodbye to relatives dying, relaxing strict quarantine rules that are causing emotional distress. House Secretary Matt Hancock says he was deeply affected by the death of a teenager in South London.
As a father of a 13-year-old myself, the reports of Ishmael dying, aged 13, without a parent at his bedside, made me weep. And the sight of his coffin being lowered into a grave without a member of his family present was too awful.
Yesterday, 761 further deaths from coronavirus in hospitals were reported here in the UK. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to it in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Something remarkable happens when just the right elements come together. Ideas with technology. Data with inspiration. Investors with solutions. This is what Invesco does every day, because they believe the possibilities of life and investing are greater when we come together. Invesco. Let's invest in greater possibilities together. To learn more, visit Invesco.com/together. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You wanted to be a teacher when you were little, but as you grew up, things changed. Teaching just didn't seem like the best option anymore, so you decided to become something else. But what would your 12-year-old self say? Interesting and innovative things are happening in teaching today, so it's time to put it back on your list. Don't try to convince yourself otherwise. You had it right the first time.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
Come on, smile. Oh, honey, he's still not smiling.
Maybe he's not a smiler.
Yeah, maybe he's just not a happy baby.
Maybe he's just being a boy.
Or maybe he's teething.
Maybe it's just a phase.
Maybe he has autism, and we can definitely do something to help.
Maybe is all you need to find out more about autism. No big, joyful smiles by 6 months is one early sign. Learn the others at autismspeaks.org/signs. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
Whoa. The moment my son saw a redwood tree.
It's huge!
Is the moment I knew that for him.
You can't even see the top of that thing.
Even the sky has no limit.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org. Learn about forests near you and discover cool things to do when you go. Your moment is out there. Find it at discovertheforest.org.
Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, we are seeing European stocks moving higher. The Stock 600 currently up 0.7%. Similarly so for the DAX in Frankfurt. The CAC 40 higher by 0.5%. And the FTSE fairly flat here in London. US futures also turning higher following a down day in Asia earlier this morning, where the Hang Seng is currently down about 0.5%. Initially, we did see investor sentiment take a bit of a dive after some poor US data, but now it seems investors instead taking a bit of heart from the fact that some European countries are considering lifting some of the restrictions on the back of the coronavirus as we start to see some leveling off of infections. Now, the risk-off mood that was dominating markets earlier is still boosting the greenback. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index currently up 0.4%. The yen slightly weaker, down 0.4 at 107.4. We are seeing the pound at 124 today. The euro also a bit weaker at 108, and keeping a particular eye on the Kiwi dollar, down 0.5% after New Zealand central bank said negative interest rates and more QE could happen. If we take a look at the bond markets, 10-year Treasury yields holding at 63 basis points, 10-year bund yields slightly higher at negative 45, and 10-year gilt yields holding at 30 basis points. Oil, meanwhile, holding around its 18-year low. Of course, demand continuing to fall, and that's weighing on WTI. Brent down 1% at $27 a barrel. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. In South Korea, President Moon Jae-in's ruling coalition has scored a big parliamentary election victory. The governing Democratic Party and its allies won 180 places in the 300-seat National Assembly, the largest parliamentary election victory in more than 30 years. The results are being seen as a show of support for the president's handling of the coronavirus outbreak. Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will announce a nationwide state of emergency, expanding it from 7 areas was declared earlier this month. That's according to the Yomori News website. The government had been expected to add only a handful of areas. The state of emergency will last until May the 6th. According to sources, Tokyo found 149 new cases of the coronavirus. That was today. And Israel's rival leaders have failed to reach a power-sharing deal by a midnight deadline, making a fourth election in a little over a year increasingly likely. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opposition leader Benny Gantz decided not to ask the president for any more time. Members may now be asked again to find someone who can put a workable government together. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, shares of the largest US banks dropped again yesterday as earnings revealed the pandemic's impact on lender revenue. Goldman took a hit of almost $900 million that contributed to a 46% decline in profit. Meanwhile, Bank of America posted its highest loan loss provisions in a decade. But a big trend is emerging as trading desks help to salvage profit. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg's Danny Berger. Danny, great to have you with us. So talk us through the reaction in terms of the shares declining for the big banks yesterday, because trading desks continue to be the highlight. But are investors just concerned that the loan loss provisions on a huge scale that we've seen from all of the banks are just not going to be enough?
Yeah, and I think that part of it is that just by the very nature of what loan loss provisions are, is gearing up for more pain to come in the future. So investors, you'd have to imagine that they'd already been pricing to some extent that banks wouldn't do well this quarter. That really can't come as a surprise to the market. So in that sort of context, investors have to be pricing for the future when they're selling off the markets. That is, if there's any sort of logic to the markets, which I guess that in itself is a question at this moment. But the idea that the banks, the five biggest we've heard of, have set aside roughly $25 billion to cover future losses, of course that's going to catch investors' attention. Now, I should also note that some of the additions related to what's called CECL. It's just a different sort of provision that they're including in these loan losses, but still, this is gearing up for suffering to come, not to mention that net interest income also is going to be suffering for them as rates continue to stay low as central banks try to aid an economy grappling with the economic freeze. So it really shows that, yes, trading might have been a lucrative opportunity for Wall Street firms, but their lending operations pose potentially a much longer and deeper trouble for the firm's profits.
But Danny, I mean, you talk about the suffering to come, and I'm sure that's in a lot of investors' minds, but Goldman, their shares actually rallied, setting them apart. What's going on?
Yeah. And, it was granted, it was only just above 0.1%, but still, I mean, that's noticeable when you see losses of the magnitude for banks that we did yesterday. And I think Goldman's story comes down to just diversity of income streams, diversity of revenue. Part of that, of course, like the other banks, they did very well with their trading. And I think that there's this idea, and even Goldman Sachs' co-head of the trading division said this on the call, that, there's been a lot of talk in the industry that it's losing talent. Goldman here is saying, look, we're no less equipped in a time when there's so much market stress and so much volume. We're still doing well. Their investing section also did well. Their investment bank, even though that they have had some balance sheet pain, it took on a $900 million hit in its debt and stock portfolio, but they had big sales, which likely helped their private equity divisions and their investing division.
And Danny, Morgan Stanley and Goldman are often pitted against each other in terms of trading. We've got Morgan Stanley due out today. What are we expecting?
Yeah, so it's likely we are going to see more of the same. I think that framing is perfect because it just highlights, just because we're in the middle of a pandemic doesn't mean that competition among these banks is any less prevalent. So Goldman, part of what the reason they did well was because of their wealth management division. We'll see if Morgan Stanley can keep that up as well. Again, trading should help Morgan Stanley a lot. The question is whether it's enough to offset what we're likely to see big piles of loan loss provision. So that trend's likely to continue, Nara.
All right, Danny, thanks very much indeed. Danny Berger there, live on the line for us, giving us some sense of what those bank results could mean. Straight ahead on Daybreak Europe, the European Commission is drawing up plans for a partial lifting of restrictions as Germany prepares to ease the lockdown. Meanwhile, it's decision day in London over how long to extend the measures here. We'll get more on the virus picture in Europe coming up here on Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. With oil falling below $20 a barrel, the Trump administration is considering paying producers not to pump. Administration officials say the Energy Department has drafted a plan to compensate companies for sitting on as much as 365 million barrels of crude. Wall Street finished in the red, weighed down by a steady drumbeat of historically bad economic reports. That may continue today when investors get the weekly tally of first-time claims for jobless benefits. Economists think 5.5 million newly unemployed people filed for help last week. If so, that would push the 4-week total above 20 million and the April unemployment rate to 15%. No one knows when things will get back to normal, but the third largest U.S. movie theater chain thinks we will be going to the movies by July. Cinemark is planning a dip our toe kind of approach, such as by requiring empty seats between moviegoers and limiting hours. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At EisnerAmper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, Principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at EisnerAmper.com/family.
Not completing high school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, the resilience in equity markets continuing. In the S&P 500, we've seen something like a 27% gain since mid-March. Looking at Europe 30 minutes into the open, the Stock 600 up 1.1%. Across regional equity benchmarks, a lot of green on the screen. The FTSE 100 up 0.8%. CAC 40, DAX and IBEX all higher by more than 1%. The FTSE MIB leads gains up 2.2%. We did see a little bit of shakiness in the US market yesterday. Some red on the screen, not making up for the previous day's gains. That was after some painful data in terms of retail sales and factory output in the US, and some painful April surveys as well, particularly with US home builder sentiment. But futures back in positive territory today ahead of initial jobless claims data. Expectation is that with the claims today, we could see claims of more than 22 million over the past 4 weeks. That would mean 1 in 8 of the US workforce out of work, wiping out the post-recession job gains. To get back to the equity market resilience, though, Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all higher by at least 0.8%. And the risk on that we're seeing is kind of reflected across assets, because yesterday we saw the 10-year Treasury yield drop 12 basis points. It edges higher by 1.5 basis points now, 65 handle. 10-year Bund yield moves up 2.5 basis points, negative 44. 10-year gilt yield goes nowhere. The dollar is perhaps one reflection of where we're still seeing bids for safe havens. The Bloomberg Dollar Index higher for a second day, though not quite seeing the strength of gains that we saw yesterday. It's even beating the yen in terms of the preference for safe havens today, because the yen slightly on the back foot against the dollar, down 0.3%. Oil hitting an 18-year low in yesterday's session. We come back ever so slightly on WTI, up 0.5%, just below $20 a barrel. Brent lower by 0.2% at 27.63. Roger.
Let's move on to some of today's top stories. Now, the virus has passed a grim milestone, with global infections now over 2 million. It took about 4 months for the virus to infect the first million. That number doubled in only 12 days. But there is some progress in Europe. Italy reported its fewest new infections in 4.5 weeks. Germany says it will allow some smaller shops to reopen next week and schools to restart gradually in early May. Fatalities in France, however, have risen to a new record.
Meanwhile, here in the UK, ministers are expected to extend the nationwide lockdown today.
The UK reported 761 further deaths from coronavirus in its hospitals on Wednesday, the fourth day in a row it has seen fewer than 800 daily deaths. But the country's chief medical advisor warned that it is probably not past its peak and may see high volumes of deaths from the disease this week. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Roger, of course, what we're expecting from President Trump today as well is for him to announce guidelines to ease stay-at-home rules.
Indeed, we're expecting guidelines coming through a little bit later. Meanwhile, in top corporate news, Taiwan Semiconductors reported a 91% rise in earnings after demand for advanced silicon remained steady during the pandemic. The results from the world's largest contract chip maker underscore resilient demand for semiconductors in smartphones and data centers, and the gains come despite warnings from TSMC's top customer Apple of work slowdowns and lower demand in China.
It's interesting because TSMC is one of the customers of ASML, who, of course, we spoke to yesterday, Roger, and ASML was talking about resilience in demand as well. TSMC shares were ever so slightly lower, by the way, down 0.4%. Now, Google is pausing recruitment for the rest of the year as the coronavirus batters its ad business. Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai also outlined other areas of cost cutting. Employees are working from home and the company is covering pay and benefits for contract staff. Last year, Google added more than 20,000 new staff.
Right, let's get the latest now in global news with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning, and you start with more detail on the picture in Europe.
Yes, good morning, Roger, and we'll start with France, which witnessed its steadiest day as coronavirus deaths spiked, reporting 1,438 yesterday, but the number of intensive care patients dropped for a seventh day. The French Director General for Health said the deaths didn't cover a 24-hour period, as the count included fatalities in recent days that weren't previously reported. In contrast, Germany says it plans to take its first cautious steps to reopening public life, although most measures to fight the coronavirus have been extended to the beginning of May. In South Korea, President Moon Jae-in's ruling party has won a landslide victory in parliamentary elections held in the throes of the pandemic. Bloomberg's Ji-hae Lee reports.
Analysts say that this time around in South Korea's general elections, North Korea and the economy was not a predominant factor in the elections, but how Moon's leadership helped combat the coronavirus outbreak and the transparency that his administration showed proved that it was worth prioritizing over all other issues. In Seoul, Ji-hae Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
For the first time, China has published a breakdown of asymptomatic coronavirus cases, those infected but without any symptoms. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
So far, 6,764 people have tested positive without showing symptoms. Only a fifth of them, 1,297, later develop symptoms. Once they do, they're reclassified as confirmed cases. Slightly more than 1,000 are still being monitored in quarantine. The rest, 4,444, were discharged after recovering. Asymptomatic transmission is puzzling. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg, Daybreak Europe.
And Singapore has reported its highest daily increase of coronavirus cases as infections have surged among low-wage foreign workers housed in dormitories. Bloomberg's Philip Hymans has more.
Authorities said an additional 447 cases were confirmed as of noon Wednesday, bringing the total to 3,699 in the country. Of the new cases, more than 400 infections, about 90%, are tied to facilities that house migrant workers in close quarters. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Now, European leaders are planning strategies for lifting coronavirus restrictions in some countries, at least. And that's despite the very different picture right across the continent. The German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, has announced tentative steps to slowly return the country to normal. But the Britain today is going to decide how long to extend its lockdown for as infections here continue to rise. Let's get more on all this from Maria Tadeo in Brussels. Maria, good morning to you. Now, first of all, Germany, they're looking to ease measures. The UK potentially extending the measures today. Different picture across Europe, but Ursula von der Leyen of the European Commission is trying to get a unified approach and a roadmap.
Exactly. Look, I think what we have now is a timeline that is really starting to emerge that does show that in the first week of May, you're going to see a return to going back to work to some extent. Germany, as you point out, is almost a good student here. They did have more supplies than any other country. They were able to test a lot of, many more people than neighbor countries, and they're in a difficult, or I would say in a different position to the rest of Europe. What I would say, though, is to say you want coordination, of course, is great. We know the European Commission, I'm sure, has very good intentions, but in real life, it's a very different situation, precisely because countries do not have the same kind of equipment, are not really ready to go back in the same way that Germany would be, and this is not going to be easy, especially not if you still have to recover from hospitals that are still under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and Maria, I mean, speaking about lack of equipment, certainly the UK government is one body that's gotten a lot of criticism for the shortage of protective gear. And speaking of the UK and the EU, all the while Brexit talks have begun again. What do we know on that front?
Well, Naira, this story, as you know, has been pushed aside for weeks now because of the coronavirus crisis. But this negotiation is to some extent still happening, but by now it's obvious that it's not a normal negotiation purely because the teams are not really able to meet. They're doing this via conference. Michel Barnier for the EU side caught the coronavirus. He was also off for a few weeks. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson also caught the coronavirus. So clearly the logistics and the environment here is not that of a normal negotiation. In Brussels, there's a lot of speculation that ultimately there will be a need to extend the transition period, that there will be a need to ask for a delay into that deadline that we're coming up against towards the end of the year. But when you speak to UK officials, they're still very much sticking to the official line that they do want to see a trade deal by the end of the year, and they still believe June will be crunch time. Whether or not they decide to ask for an extension, they still say they don't want to do it. Having said that, I do hear many more voices now saying the reality is this negotiation was thrown up in the air by the coronavirus. We all have to admit it.
If you would, Maria, BTPs in Italy, yields shooting up. Why?
Well, this is something that kind of went slightly off the radar yesterday, but it is nonetheless significant because even though the European Central Bank is buying BTPs in the market, you're still seeing some stress that does flare up from time to time. Approaching that 2% level is something we hadn't seen in weeks, and it comes down to a number of things. You could argue it's tactical buying from the ECB, and this will self-correct, but also the fact that the politics are becoming very difficult and unstable. You have two big decisions coming up, whether or not to trigger the ESM and when to go back to work.
Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo from Brussels. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. And that 10-year BTP yield down 6 basis points to a 182 handle now. Meanwhile, green on the screen for European equities. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Witham offers an elite team of seasoned specialists providing world-class advisory, audit, and tax solutions to the financial services industry.
Hi, I'm Tom Angel, partner and practice leader of Witham's Financial Services Group. Witham is a nationally recognized advisory and accounting firm serving private equity, venture capital, hedge funds, broker-dealers, 40 Act funds, and SPACs. We provide customized support to our clients, especially emerging managers. Our deep experience and expertise makes Witham the firm of choice in the financial service industry.
Visit Witham.com to contact a member of Witham's Financial Services team.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why? Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
When we're stuck indoors all day, we might find our energy bills creeping up uninvited. The cheeky rascals. And none of us need that right now. But by simply switching your energy with Money Supermarket, you could save £280 on your bills. It's just one small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you, I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. They can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know...
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And we're seeing green on the screen in Europe after a rather mixed session in Asia. Right now, the Stock 600 is up 1.03%. The FTSE 100 up 0.5%. We're also seeing the CAC up 1.13%, the DAX up 1.1%, and the FTSE MIB up 2.1%. Meanwhile, looking to the US opening, S&P Mini Futures up 0.6%, Dow up 0.6% as well, and the Nasdaq up 0.8%. So there certainly seems to be an appetite for risk out there right now. Looking to what's going on in the commodities sphere, in oil, Brent crude 27.49 is where we find that. That's down 0.7%. We're also seeing in terms of WTI, which has been hovering just below, it now is below, in fact, $20 a barrel, $19.9 the barrel. That's up 0.1%. Keeping an eye also on US Treasuries, the handle there is 65. It's up to 2 basis points right now, the yield. And also keeping an eye, of course, on the movement of the dollar. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, the dollar stronger by 0.4%. In terms of cable, the pound is currently 1.2482. That's weaker by 0.3%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Roger, thank you. The coronavirus has infected 2 million people around the world, a grim milestone exposing the difficulty of trying to contain the deadly pathogen. What began as a mysterious pneumonia-like illness in Wuhan, China late last year has morphed into a global health crisis that has threatened health systems and economies. It took about 4 months for the virus to infect 1 million people and only 12 days for that number to double. Now, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will announce a nationwide state of emergency, expanding it from 7 areas declared earlier this month. That's according to the Yomiuri news agency. The government had been expected to add only a handful of areas. The state of emergency will last until May the 6th. According to sources, Tokyo found 149 new cases of coronavirus, and that was today. And finally, we're ending on a cheerful note. A 99-year-old war veteran has completed his 100th lap of his garden and raised a whopping £12 million for the National Health Service. Captain Tom Moore originally wanted to raise £1,000 for the group NHS Charities Together, but he has now hit almost 12,000 times his initial target, thanks to online donations from over 600,000 people. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Lovely, heartwarming story amid all the gloom.
It's absolutely lovely. If you watch the videos of him, he walks with his walking frame. He had a hip operation, actually, through the NHS, and it was so successful, and they said, you know, they treated him so well, he just wanted to give back at a time of a crisis. And it also shows you're never too old.
No, exactly. Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Thank you so much. Now, let's get back to markets, and our guest for the rest of the hour is Frederic Ducrozet, strategist at Pictet Wealth Management, joining us now live from Geneva. Frederic, great to have you with us. What really stole the focus across equity markets yesterday, I mean, the bank earnings to a certain extent, but also the very painful retail sales, factory output data we had for March, as well as some April surveys. And today, the number we've got our eyes trained on, of course, is initial jobless claims. Yet we've seen so much resilience in the US equity market. Let's just start with that first, something like a 27% rise from mid-March. This as we're expecting yet more earnings downgrades. What do you attribute the resilience in risk assets in the US to?
Well, first of all, we know the story. There are tons of liquidity being injected every day from the Fed, from every central bank across the world. I think also more importantly, the structure of the financial system has been strengthened and made sure that it would survive any kind of shock in terms of, for instance, dollar funding and a number of systemic risks that we've been facing 10 years ago during the global financial crisis that have been addressed this time. So at the very least, the tail risks have been removed, and the hope, the price that we see, the price action in equity markets in particular, reflects, I think, the hope that the broader policy response will be up to the challenge, that we'll get this recovery, maybe not T-shaped or very strong, or maybe we need to wait for another couple of quarters, and the earnings will be hit, of course, in the meantime. But again, looking at the medium term, what the market is telling us is that next year could be actually not as bad as we feared a few weeks ago.
Is that also, Frederic, do you think, reflected in the action that's been going on in Europe? The ECB, various European nations, again, very much putting their foot on the accelerator as far as interventions of various kinds are concerned. But is it enough?
No, the short answer is no. The ECB has provided the necessary backstop and circuit breaker, I would say, for this crisis not to turn into a financial crisis and something much, much worse. So that was necessary. It's not sufficient for the recovery to build from here. And by the way, it's not the ECB's mandate to fix the economy over the longer term or the public finances, for that matter. It's the job of the government. And what the market in Europe is telling us in that case is that it's not enough. I think the key point here, looking at the price action in Italian BTPs, for instance, over the past couple of sessions, is that who's going to pay the price? It's not an appropriate answer, way to put the question, I think, but still what the market is pricing in is the medium-term outlook for Italian debt, which is likely to remain on the Italian balance sheet for now, unless we get some sort of policy decision and some sort of debt mutualization in the future.
Yeah. Frederic, you've had Ray Dalio on the one hand say you'd be crazy to buy government bonds, whereas BlackRock and a number of other big investors have been saying buy what the Fed's buying: treasuries, investment-grade debt, fallen angels, bond ETFs. Are investors in Europe of the same mindset that you should be buying what the ECB's buying?
I think in credit markets in particular, the ECB has a longer experience compared with the Fed in buying corporate credit. They've moved down the credit spectrum. They could even buy, perhaps in the future, high-yield debt under some very strict conditions. But still, we have this experience, and market participants have been adjusting to this. So yes, I think in Euro credit, it's a safer place overall in our view than in some other areas of the U.S. market. Having said that, of course, the recent Fed decision is a game changer as well. In terms of government bonds, obviously we are talking about different things from Germany to Italy. But here again, I think the ECB's message, whatever happens on the political side, is strong enough. They will not allow any financial fragmentation that would prevent the recovery from building from here, and that would actually weigh on the inflation outlook over the medium term. So there might be volatility. There is currently as we speak, but I think again the ECB's message is strong enough to support this market as well.
But Frederic, moving from bonds to equities, where are the sectors that show most resilience that could come back? I mean, many people are surprised, I think, by EasyJet this morning saying they don't need, they've got enough cash to last in effect for 9 months. But I mean, in general, I mean, I imagine the travel sector is one of the worst hit.
It's, I mean, there are so many idiosyncratic risks at the moment with the threats of bailouts, maybe some consolidation, mergers and acquisition in other sectors. What we see is really something that still favors quality balance sheet. So it's not so much in terms of sectors, especially in Europe, where, as you know, the weight of the tech sector is much lower than in the US. But we would tend to look at companies on an individual basis and looking at the balance sheet and the quality and the indebtedness and these kind of metrics that really favor, again, defensive names and sectors also overall.
Frederic, are you on board with some analysts and investors out there? I mean, Standard Bank is one of them, saying sterling's going to strengthen to 80 pence per euro. Obviously, it's not been there since the 2016 Brexit vote, possibly beyond, because they say the pandemic means the deadline for a trade deal with the EU this year could be either pushed back, delaying the risk for the pound, or see more favourable terms given to the UK. Would you want to be adding pound exposure either against the dollar or the euro right now?
Longer term, we still see a risk that the big issues with between the UK and the EU have not been addressed, and as a matter of fact, it's not the top priority right now. Short term, yes, maybe, because, I mean, there could be upside from time to time, because the policy response in the UK to some extent has been more flexible, more targeted. Direct, explicit monetary financing is not possible with the ECB. That's what the Bank of England decided. Fiscal stimulus could be ramped up. Yes, there might be some reasons to be relatively more optimistic over the short term at least, but that's not something we would see over the medium term. We tend to fade any strength in the sterling from these levels.
All right, Frederic, thank you so much for being with us. Frederic Ducrozet there, strategist at Pictet Wealth Management, joining us down the line from Geneva. Many thanks for being with us. Coming up, Matt Miller and Caroline Hepker in a takeover Daybreak Europe, and they'll be speaking to Paul Brain, head of fixed income at Newton Investment Management. Nera, we were talking about green on the screen earlier. We're now almost an hour into the European opening. How is it looking?
Still green, Roger. The Stock 600 up more than 1%, 1.1%. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, you've got the FTSE 100 lagging a bit, up 0.4%. The FTSE MIB leading, on the other hand, up more than 2%. IBEX, DAX and CAC 40 all up more than 1%. We saw some weakness in US equities yesterday following that painful data, retail sales and factory output, and some April surveys. Futures in the green, S&P E-minis up 0.8%. The 10-year yield edges up 2 basis points. This is Bloomberg.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom?
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The world 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else. I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And good morning from Bloomberg's Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So the markets this morning in Europe, we gain on the Euro Stoxx 600, Matt, up by 1.1%. The FTSE 100, though, is the laggard, only gaining 0.3% versus Germany's Xetra DAX up by 1.2%. Interestingly, the Italian FTSE MIB, though, is the outperformer. We gain 2.3%. This as the debate in Europe heats up around the lockdown, how to unwind it. Calls for a united approach from the EU, but it does seem as if countries are doing slightly different things, probably because they're facing different coronavirus pandemics.
Yeah, for sure. We also tend to play kind of leapfrog and catch up sometimes with other markets. So in Europe, we had a drop of more than 3% yesterday in the cash trade, and the U.S. was down only 1%. So it looks like to some extent European indexes are playing catch up a little bit to the U.S., although you do see U.S. futures gaining as well today. So the question is how this is all going to shake out. Let's get over right now to our guest in the studio. Paul Brain joins us from Newton Investment Management. He's the head of fixed income there. And Paul, let's start with what you've witnessed so far. I mean, in your career, you say there are similarities to what you're seeing now with what you saw during the 2008 financial crisis. How is that playing out, and how are you positioning your portfolio to stay alive through this?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Well, there are similarities. Of course, each crisis is different, and certainly this crisis is completely different from the financial crisis in many respects. Similarities are, of course, you've got very poor liquidity conditions initially. You have some dysfunctional markets, mispricing perhaps in some of the fixed income markets. And then you have central banks, and you have the authorities stepping in to calm the waters a little bit and then fix some of that liquidity problem. And that's slowly coming back to normal conditions. This time around, of course, we're seeing much more and faster fiscal stimulus, fiscal intervention. We're seeing, of course, the drop in interest rates happen very rapidly down to very low level, and we're seeing much more, much faster QE type programs coming through. The response from the authorities, I think, is faster this time around because, of course, we've been through this in recent past with the financial crisis, these liquidity conditions. So they know what to do and how to do it. So they're having to do it in much bigger size because we came from a low interest rate position in the first place. So they're having to do a lot more QE. And on the fiscal side, of course, the fiscal plan, the support for the economy is unprecedented compared to where we were in the financial crisis.
What do you make of the debate that is being had in Europe, Italy, whether or not to use the ESM? So the Italian Premier Giuseppe Conte saying that it needs to be approved before they'll think about it. But Italian yields, meanwhile, are moving, obviously because we don't have Corona bonds, no agreement on that. 1.79 is the yield for Italian BTPs on the 10-year. So we dropped 9 basis points. That's another big move for Italian BTPs today.
Yeah, they're bouncing around quite a bit, aren't they? Because obviously we've had a few days of yields rising in Italy, spread widening against Germany on a belief that they won't use the ESM, that they're going to have fights and try and get the recovery fund up and running, and a recovery fund that is jointly funded by all governments, so effectively a joint bond. So maybe we're seeing a bit of relief from that. We're seeing perhaps some support for Italy because of the number of cases and the number of deaths slowly having passed the peak, declining. I think I don't think we're out of the woods. I think we can see more of this. The political debate between the periphery and between Italy and the core is going to continue. And until we get a joint bond, I think we will always have a widespread between Italy and the core countries in Germany.
Is that going to happen, Paul? Do you think that's because here in Berlin, from this vantage point, it doesn't seem like that's at all a possibility. Certainly not when I talk to politicians.
No, I don't think it will happen this time around. I think they believe that the ECB with its PP program and the deviation from the capital fee structure, I think they've done enough, perhaps in this crisis to stabilise spread. You know, when I say a wide spread, I'm not suggesting we go up to 300-400 basis points here. I just think a spread above or around 200 over Germany is probably correct, whilst you have such poor or big deviation between the finances of Italy and the finances of Germany. I think it doesn't help in some respects that the Northern European economies seem to be faring better through this virus crisis than the Southern European economies. And that's not going to engender a group discussion about a group bond or a group funded bond. So I think we're not going to see it this time around. We probably need to see further economic pain for the North before we see the need to get a joint coronavirus bond out there.
Can I just get your take quickly, Paul? I mean, the Germans would say, yeah, well, we were prepared for this kind of thing. You know, that's why we weren't running budget deficits. This is the reason that we put austerity into place, and may even accuse the periphery of being a little bit fiscally irresponsible. On the other hand, Joe Stiglitz says that it's precisely because they've joined the euro, because they don't have the ability to devalue their own currency, that Italy, which is a huge economy, ended up in this position. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the perennial debate, isn't it? I think you're correct to identify that. I mean, you could argue that Germany has a lot of customers in Southern Europe because of the higher spending capacity in Southern Europe compared to Northern Europe. It's the reason why it has a current account surplus and the rest of the current account deficit. I think they are symbiotic. I think you can't have one without the other. Within the European construct. So I think that debate will go on, and I think you're not going to change the spending patterns. You're not going to change the financing patterns of Italy by punishing them with much higher borrowing costs. So that lesson has to be learned as well. So I don't. That's why I don't think we're going to see a joint bond, because I think there are many people in Northern Europe and particularly in Germany who would say it would be rewarding them for their past digressions.
Interesting. Yes, that is certainly one perspective. Look, how do you think that...
It's like the perspective here,
yes.
I'd say.
Yeah. How do you think that Europe is faring right now in terms of, this week has kind of been dominated by all of these video conference calls and the fact that Europe has not really come up with this unified response. Have you got much hope that will happen as we now think about unwinding the lockdown? Because that's really kind of one of the themes, although it's a very kind of cautious unwinding, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it probably has to be, doesn't it? Because there's a great chance that the virus sticks around with us for a long period. I think in 6 months' time, or maybe even 12 months' time, once we're through this, I think Europe will still be left with a greater chance of having low inflation, maybe potentially deflation, because of their slow approach to the economic shock, should we call it that, as compared to some other countries. Not necessarily talking about lockdowns. I'm talking about getting together and actually getting financing out to those companies and the consumer that needs it at the right time. It's a very disjointed approach and a fairly slow approach, one that involves obviously quite a lot of politics. But I think we will still be left with the potential for lower economic growth in Europe at a lower inflation rate in Europe, even once we come through the other side, let's say compared to perhaps the US or even in Asian markets.
Interesting. Thank you so much for your views. Paul Brain, Head of Fixed Income at Newton Investment Management, for joining us this morning. Matt, I just note that we're cheering here in the UK, £1.1 billion offered to SMEs in terms of loans. 10 times as much has been offered in pretty much a timescale in Switzerland. So I think it's going to be interesting how that plays out, how much is being offered to SMEs as to how much they survive.
Yeah, and how quickly can you get it to them? It seems to be one of the most important and one of the most frustrating problems across really around the world. Let's get over to Leanne Gerrans right now for your World National News headlines. Leanne?
Matt, good morning. The coronavirus has passed a grim milestone with global infections topping 2 million. It took about 4 months for the virus to infect the first million. That number doubled in only 12 days, but there is some progress in Europe. Italy reported its fewest new infections in 4.5 weeks, but France witnessed its deadliest day as coronavirus deaths spiked, reporting 1,438 yesterday. The French Director General for Health said the deaths didn't cover a 24-hour period, as the count included fatalities in recent days that weren't previously reported. Meanwhile, here in the UK, ministers are expected to extend the nationwide lockdown today. With the latest, Bloomberg's Charles Capel reports.
The UK reported 761 further deaths from coronavirus in its hospitals on Wednesday, the fourth day in a row it has seen fewer than 800 daily deaths. But the country's chief medical advisor warned that it is probably not past its peak and may see high volumes of deaths from the disease this week. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In contrast to this, Germany says it plans to take its first cautious steps to reopening public life, although most measures to fight the coronavirus have been extended to the beginning of May. Bloomberg's Patrick Donoghue has all those details.
Chancellor Angela Merkel said the country's progress in slowing the spread of the sickness was fragile, and that any relaxation must be accompanied by strict hygiene rules and social distancing. Small retailers, car dealerships, bicycle shops, and bookstores can open as early as next week, but restaurants, bars, and clubs will stay closed. Large public events won't happen in Germany until at least August 31st. In Berlin, Patrick Donoghue, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
And in South Korea, President Moon Jae-in's ruling coalition has scored a big parliamentary election victory. The governing Democratic Party and its allies won 180 places in the 300-seat National Assembly, the largest parliamentary election victory in more than 30 years. The results are being seen as a show of support for the president's handling of the coronavirus outbreak. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans there with all the world and national news. Now, on a programming note, I want to tell you about Bloomberg Westminster, 12 noon UK time today. We've got the former Conservative MP David Lidington. He's a big voice in the Tory party, so I think it'll be interesting to get his take on probably the continuation of the lockdown in Britain. Then also the historian David Cogan joins us to talk about the Labour Party under new leader Keir Starmer. And don't forget, 5 p.m, The Cable with John Ferrer and Guy Johnson. So tune in for that.
Sounds very cool indeed. I will definitely be tuning in. When we come back, in praise of Germany, Bloomberg's Andreas Kluth is writing about Chancellor Merkel's sober handling of the pandemic as parts of the lockdown are eased, even as the country's infection rate climbs for the first time in a week. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Rishad Salamat.
We're back. The International Monetary Fund saying that economic growth in the Asia-Pacific will likely slow to a standstill this year, something that hasn't happened in the last 6 decades. The fund is also urging governments to utilize all policy options to support their economies during this pandemic, including bilateral and multilateral swap arrangements. Now let's bring in Chang Yong Ri, Asia and Pacific Department Director at the IMF. Thank you so much for joining us. What's your basic hypothesis as to what's going on now with all these linkages that are at the moment in place, and are governments doing enough?
Yes, actually, I think it's quite astonishing that Asia's growth rate in 2020 is expected to be 0%. And actually, in the last 60 years, Asia has not experienced zero growth. And so I think this is very unprecedented time. We think that this is, Asian policymaker has to use whatever arsenal they have to fight for this temporary crisis.
But is the level of trillions of dollars of stimulus affordable here? Is there a risk of fueling financial risk?
At this moment, I think we already see there are significant capital outflow from the region. But given that loose monetary policy in advanced economies, I think the liquidity in general will be ample, even in Asia.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. After a mixed session in Asia, we had Japan and the Hong Kong down, but China higher. We are seeing green on the screen for European equities. The FTSE eking out a little bit of a gain, up 0.3%, but CAC DAX and Spain's IBEX up more than 1%. FTSE MIB up 2.5% over in Italy. And U.S. equity index futures are in the green as well. S&P 500 mini futures up nearly 0.9% this morning, trimming the losses from a day earlier. The question really is, does the economic data, the corporate results match the moves in the market? That's what everyone's going to be digesting, especially after yesterday's miserable economic data. Record declines for retail sales, factory output here in the U.S. And today, of course, we get the jobless claims. Will it show a more bleak economic picture? The surveys for 5.5 million people who lost their jobs last week. The U.S. dollar this morning extending gains. The Bloomberg Dollar Index up 0.3%. Dollar higher against the euro, the yen, and the British pound this morning. British pound is trading just above 1.24 against the cable. And also in treasuries, I want to check out what's going on in the 10-year yield in the 19s after devastating IEA report yesterday. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. The coronavirus has infected 2 million people around the world, a grim milestone exposing the difficulty of trying to contain the deadly pathogen. What began as a mysterious pneumonia-like illness in Wuhan, China, late last year, has morphed into a global health crisis that has threatened health systems and economies. It took about 4 months for the virus to infect 1 million people and only 12 days for that number to double. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will announce a nationwide state of emergency, expanding it from 7 areas declared earlier this month. That's according to the Yomiuri News website. The government had been expected to add only a handful of areas. According to sources, Tokyo found 149 new cases of coronavirus. That was today. And Israel's rival leaders have failed to reach a power-sharing deal by a midnight deadline, making a fourth election in a little over a year increasingly likely. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and opposition leader Benny Gantz decided not to ask the president for any more time. Members may now be asked again to find someone who can put a workable government together. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It has just gone 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We are joined by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's writing about Germany's handling of the coronavirus crisis as the country looks to finally start easing some of the lockdown restrictions. On Monday, they're going to open a few stores. I think 800, if they're 800 square meters or less, they can open. Or if you have a bigger store, you can open an 800 square meter part of your shop. Andreas, the idea here, Germany has done better than other countries in terms of handling this pandemic. Is that the case?
That's definitely the case. Not in any sort of pioneering way. There's no superlative, but it just, for a large country, it was just I think this has to do with German culture even, a very competent, steady jobs, doing lots of little things right that were in place before, such as early rollout of widespread testing, such as many available tests in intensive care units and more, and very good collaboration, in contrast to the United States, very good collaboration between the central government and the federal states.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, one of the issues is the preparation was there, wasn't it? And certainly Germany has far more intensive care beds, per head than pretty much any other country in Europe. So, it was always going to be in a strong position, I guess.
Yeah, at the moment, they have 10,000 empty beds, free beds. So that also means that as people come in, they can get actual treatment. You can save some lives. It also means that they have to take
Now, I'm not sure if you hear that, Caroline, or it's just my audio, but it
no,
seems
I
like
think I hear it too. I know it's not
so
a great
we're losing
line with Andreas. I'm so sorry.
It's unfortunate, but I will say this. First of all, I love his stories. You can check out his work by typing OPIN go. Second of all, you hear this a lot. Certainly, where I am, obviously you're going to hear this, that Berlin was just better prepared, that the federal structure is better, is more capable of handling this kind of thing. And it's weird to hear people lauding politicians, because normally you just don't ever hear that. My mother complains about the lack of PPE and testing in the U.S. Obviously in Britain, that's been a huge problem, as well as in the periphery. But here in Germany, they just got it together because they're Germans.
Yeah, well, and that is the issue. I mean, I wonder what it means also to have a chancellor who has a scientific background. She's one of the few leaders who is a scientist by training, and how much does that help? As you say, in the UK, also, there was this idea of sort of abandoning testing quite early on. Now, criticism, for example, of Sweden, the Prime Minister there, Stephen Löfven, who's taken a much more lax approach. So hopefully we have Andreas Kluth back with us, Bloomberg opinion columnist. Just briefly, what do you think this is going to mean for Angela Merkel, for her party, for politics going forwards in Germany?
Well, first of all, she's a lame duck. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes.
She's a lame duck, and now she's anything but a lame duck. Or, I mean, she won't run again. But she's extremely popular. Her ratings are up. Also for her party, it's the party in power. They benefit. They seem to be competent. The main debate now is which person in her own party, conservative bloc, will be nominated to succeed her. And it's almost a foregone conclusion that will be the next chancellor. The decision for that was supposed to happen this month, but it's now delayed until December. They're all together basically running Germany as a technocracy by listening to experts and not bickering with each other.
I also have to point out, my wife is Spanish, and she in Spain says, the thing is, Germans just follow the rules. The Spaniards do not. So there's, I think, a cultural difference. Maybe that's too much of a stereotype, but there may be a cultural difference that makes a difference as well. All right, Andreas, thanks very much. This is Bloomberg.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Houston Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta talked about the impact the global pandemic has had on the league and his team. Fertitta told ESPN his organization has been able to keep everyone despite the pandemic because of his business plan.
I mean, it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible for all of us. I mean, it's horrible for the players. It's we haven't had any staff reductions at the Houston Rockets. We haven't asked anybody to take any pay cuts at the Houston Rockets because all my businesses operate in a silo, and that's a very well-financed and very successful business.
Fertitta says they all want to get back to basketball and play in front of the fans, but doesn't believe that it is possible or the right thing to do. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Grainger, offering supplies and solutions for every industry. Visit Grainger.com.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Warm welcome to the programme this morning. So let's have a look at the markets this morning as we see the US Stock 600 higher by 1% this morning, a 1.3% gain for the Xetra DAX, and also the FTSE MIB Italian stocks actually up by 2.2%. That's quite a contrast to the FTSE 100 where we see flat to slightly negative. But then looking at the pound, we're weaker 0.2% on the pound, trading at 124.93. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index also stronger 0.3% in the bond markets this morning, with Italian BTPs of great interest. 1.79% for Italian BTPs, so dropping 9 basis points, and US yields at 64 basis points. We do get obviously some big numbers from the US, Matt, later today on unemployment claims potentially topping 20 million. And also on Friday, we're going to get the Chinese GDP number expected to be a big hit. So I think those will be in focus for the markets, but not until later.
You know, it's weird to see the FTSE is down and the pound is down. Usually when the FTSE's down as everything else rises, that's because the pound is gaining value against the dollar. But what's going on today is, number one, you've got a bunch of companies that have gone ex-dividend. Reckitt Benckiser or Benckiser or however you pronounce that company is ex-dividend, so they're off 3%, and they're taking the most points off of the index. But then you've got these, very heavy oil producers listed on the FTSE, BP, for example, and Royal Dutch Shell, and they are just getting crushed as well. I mean, they're down just over 1%, but they're so heavy that they're pulling 3 or 4 points off of the index, and that, in case you were wondering, is why the FTSE loses ground while everybody else gains.
Well, do you want to know my tuppence worth then? If you want a clue as to Reckitt Benckiser and how to say it, it's like geezer.
I'm not sure if you're allowed to say geezer on, right? I think there's so many weird Ofcom rules. We were talking about Microsoft GitHub at one point, And I got in trouble, I think, for saying that, because in English, in American, you can call somebody the first half of that name, and it doesn't mean very much. It's not at all offensive.
Yeah, it's rude here. Yeah.
But apparently in the UK, it's a terrible thing to say. Whereas in the UK, people use words that in the US you would be pretty much executed for saying. So
really, I'll have to look those up.
Let's get over to Ray Dalio right now. Bridgewater Associates leader told Bloomberg that investors should steer clear of government debt, possibly for years. Let's listen in.
This period, like the 1930 to 45 period, is a period in which I think you'd be pretty crazy to own bonds. Okay, because what is a debt? A debt in a fiat currency is a promise to receive currency, and isn't it pretty clear they're going to make a lot of currency? So I think that changes the appeal of bonds. Why in the world would you hold the bonds? And that has a big effect. So when you start to think about how much wealth is in bonds, and where is that wealth going to go, and how's that going to work, and how are they going to control it? And so when I think of storehold of wealth, I think, what are the stable storehold of wealth in the form of stocks and other kinds of debt? I want those that have strong balance sheets, stable incomes, and so on, so that you're basically having those assets that will perform well in any kind of an environment, and I'll look at them based on how cheap or expensive they are. And when I think of the world, I divide the world into different locations. As I say, I think that this picture is very much like the 1980 to 90 period, when we're flooding it with financial assets, with money and credit, but they're not getting to a number of emerging countries. So when I look at the distribution of wealth in terms of their balance sheets, like every individual, I look at what is their income, what is their expenses, and what is their savings. And when we go through that exercise, then it changes. I don't want to be in places that don't have good ones. And then I look at civil behavior. How are people with each other? Is there going to be a fight? And will people be orderly? Will we work it out? And then what will be the changes in tax rules? Taxation. Will corporate taxes come back in certain ways? What will the changes? Because we're not going to deal with that equally. So I'm looking at all of that to create a picture of differentiation. I see a very differentiated world. And when we talk about the economy coming back, I think you have to realize what big changes are that are behind that can't be changed. Let's say, for example, self-sufficiency. I think we're going to produce different things and we'll be self-sufficient. We operated in a world where we were globally connected, and whoever was most efficient would get it, and we would just go get it wherever it was most efficiently produced. That world won't happen again. So you're going to come to a world where you'll originate it, produce it at home, and that you'll start to think about what do you need. And I imagine that we're going to be rebuilding our basics, healthcare systems. How much savings are we going to put into rebuilding some of those basics, like basics of hospital? What's our storage for the next time we have the next epidemic? And then there'll be other things, climate change. This is the act of nature that hit us over the head, the virus. But there's other evolutionary costs that are going to come in the form of climate change and those types of things. All of those things are important to imagine in imagining the new world order, I think.
That was Ray Dalio, the co-CIO of Bridgewater Associates, speaking with our very own Eric Schatzker.
Yeah, very interesting conversation. Right, let's get over to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, who's got all the latest when it comes to global news and the coronavirus spread. Good morning, Leanne.
Caroline, good morning and thank you. Global coronavirus infections have now topped 2 million. It took about 4 months for the virus to infect the first million. That number doubled in only 12 days. But there is some progress in Italy. and Europe. Italy reported its fewest new infections in 4.5 weeks. Germany says it will allow some smaller shops to reopen next week and schools to restart gradually in early May. Fatalities in France, however, rose to a new record, and Spanish cases rose to the most in 6 days as well. Now, here in the UK, the lockdown looks set to be extended at least until early May. House Secretary Matt Hancock yesterday insisted it was too early to make changes to the current regime. But Chris Whitty, England's chief medical officer, said the statistics show the peak of the pandemic is approaching, but it's not safe to say if we've passed it.
After every weekend, we see a dip over the weekend and for the 2 days afterwards, and then an increase as we catch up with the numbers. There may well be a bounce up tomorrow. I think it's very important we don't get to the point where we say, look at the numbers of deaths, that means we've passed the peak.
The total number of cases in the UK is at nearly 100,000, with the total number of deaths at 12,868. In case you had forgotten, Brexit is back on the radar after the UK's chief negotiator, David Frost, and his EU counterpart, Michel Barnier, held a constructive video conference. That was on Wednesday. They plan to seek, quote, tangible progress by June in the negotiations over their future relationship. The 3 rounds of talks will take place in the weeks of April the 20th, May the 11th, and June the 1st. And finally, in South Korea, President Moon Jae-in's ruling party has won a landslide victory in parliamentary elections held in the throes of the pandemic. Bloomberg's Ji-Hae Lee reports.
Analysts say that this time around in South Korea's general elections, North Korea and the economy was not a predominant factor in the elections, but how Moon's leadership helped combat the coronavirus outbreak and the transparency that his administration showed proved that it was worth prioritizing over all other issues. In Seoul, Ji-Hae Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with the world news. Now let's get the morning sports news. Obviously, coronavirus dominated too. Here's William Essler.
An agreement has been reached to end the Scottish Championship, League One and League Two seasons early due to the coronavirus outbreak. It means Dundee United have been crowned champions of the second tier, with Raith Rovers and Cove Rangers winning their respective divisions. However, the SPL have yet to confirm if those sides will be promoted and clubs at the bottom of their tables relegated. Saracens say they will place some staff on furlough and ask high earners to defer their wages due to the ongoing coronavirus outbreak. The Rugby Union Premiership champions say those on more than £75,000 would then have their wages repaid over an 18-month period following the start of next season. Saracens will be relegated to the Championship at the end of the current season as punishment for breaching the top-flight salary cap.
All right, now when we come back, economic data points paint a very grim picture of the coronavirus impact. But according to our next guest, market fundamentals are looking kind of positive. We'll discuss with Andrew Sheets, Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Next, this is Bloomberg.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, CohnReznick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at CohnReznick.com/MLB. CohnReznick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be...
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Horder, but it's Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It was a mixed session in Asia, but we're seeing relatively green on the screen in Europe. FTSE 100 is dead flat, 0% what I'm looking at on the screen. CAC 40 up 1 3/10%. Similar situation for the DAX, the IBEX as well in the green, as so is the Italian MIB. And U.S. futures are in the green as well. S&P 500 mini futures up 0.6%. So a bit of a risk-off session. This comes after yesterday, a miserable economic data day for the United States. Today we get those jobless claims. That's going to be one to watch. Will this show a more bleak economic data? The last 3 weeks, more than 16 million people lost their jobs. The U.S. dollar this morning is extending gains, higher against most major peers. We are seeing a pause in the BTPs. Big selling yesterday. We saw Italian 10-year BTPs yields down 9% this morning. So a little bit of a pause there. And then in the commodities market, gold, $1,723 an ounce, up 0.3%. Everyone's talking about whether or not we can reach $1,800 an ounce. And then in the oil market, WTI trading just above $20 a barrel. Earlier it was below $20 a barrel. One of these key levels. IEA report yesterday showed the serious demand destruction. On top of that, we had the biggest ever weekly increase in U.S. domestic crude supplies. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Anne-Marie, good morning and thank you. President Trump will unveil plans to relax stay-at-home guidelines today. He's suggesting that the coronavirus pandemic is plateauing in parts of the country. The president spoke with more than 200 business leaders yesterday, but finance executives told him that more testing needs to be in place before people feel comfortable coming back to work. Now, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will announce a nationwide state of emergency, expanding it from 7 areas declared earlier this month. That's according to the Yomiuri News website. The government had been expected to add only a handful of areas. According to sources, Tokyo found 149 new cases of coronavirus, and that was today. And finally, we're going to end on a little bit of an inspirational note. A 99-year-old war veteran has walked 100 laps of his garden and raised a whopping £12 million for the National Health Service. Captain Tom Moore originally wanted to raise £1,000 for the group NHS Charities Together, but he has now hit almost 12,000 times his initial target thanks to online donations from over 600,000 people. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
This guy is a legend. He used a walker.
He is also one happy chap. He was just absolutely thrilled. I watched a bit of video footage of him. He's got a walking frame. He passed his 100 lap and celebrated. But what an amazing character. He had a hip transplant on the NHS, wanted to give them something back. Is it a hip transplant or a hip replacement? Hip replacement, yes. On the NHS. Wanted to give back to the health service, and he did so by raising all this money.
Amazing. Captain Thomas Moore, born in 1920, according to Wikipedia. He served in India and the Burma campaign in the Second World War, and he looks like one cool cat. Leanne, thanks so much for that. Leanne Gerrans with your world and national news headlines. Let's get over to the U.S. right now. Nathan Hager is standing by, getting ready for Daybreak, Bloomberg Daybreak in the U.S. Nathan, what do you got planned for us?
Well, Matt, good morning. We're waiting to hear once again from the president today. He says he's going to roll out guidelines as soon as today on reopening the country, with signs the coronavirus may be peaking in parts of the U.S. We're going to take a look at the steps the president may be considering and talk with Matt Maley of Miller Tabak about what it could mean for risk sentiment. We are also bracing for another rough round of economic data. The latest weekly jobless claims come out this morning. Millions have filed week on week. They really have been the key indicator of the bleak toll that COVID-19 has taken on the workforce. Neil Dutta of Renaissance Macro will join us with his view on the shape of the recovery. And the last of the big banks reports earnings today. We look ahead to how Morgan Stanley has weathered the crisis with Bloomberg's Shanali Bossack. Karen Moscow is with me. Hope you will be as well for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Matt.
That is very cool. I'm one of I'm lucky enough to be on Neil Dutta's, email list. And I have to say, I must get 2,000 or 3,000 emails a day. I'm not exaggerating.
That's a hefty bank account for all that information, Matt.
But I open very few of them, of course.
Yeah.
I always click on Neil's stuff. It's really fascinating and a fresh take to hear from Neil Dutta. So looking forward to that. Nathan Hager coming up with Karen Moscow next. If you're listening on Sirius XM, channel 119, if you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you will hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Okay, well, let's talk about the markets then this morning because, of course, we've reached another grim benchmark, haven't we, when it comes to coronavirus cases, now more than 2 million around the world. And the economic impact is becoming really tangible with US and UK retail sales plunging last month. And as Nathan mentioned, the unemployment figures being closely watched. US President Donald Trump set to unveil guidelines about easing those stay-at-home rules. European leaders are planning strategies for lifting the lockdown. So where does all of that leave investors? For more, let's bring in Andrew Sheets, who is Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. Really good to speak to you and have you on the programme, Andrew. You argue that volatility in markets means that we should be getting back to basics and that actually you remain fairly positive on credit. Explain why.
We do. I think there are a couple of important factors here. The first is a belief that markets lead the economy, and I think that's very much still going to be the case this time, even as we're going through a historic recession. We think that April and May are going to mark probably the trough in global economic activity. I think with that in mind, it would make sense that the market trough to happen before that, to be the trough that we saw in March. And so I think that we're very much still in line with some of that usual sequencing of the markets pricing in and kind of fully pricing in the recession before the worst of the data actually hits. The second factor is we've just had an unprecedented policy response to this unprecedented drop in growth. The Fed, the ECB, they're all acting with multiple times the amount of purchases that we saw during the global financial crisis, and they're doing those much faster. And I think that also is generally going to be supportive for the markets, especially credit.
What do you think about earnings? Because a lot of people think when looking at equity indexes that they need to fall at least as much as, or around as much as earnings fall. Maybe this situation is different from your typical recession in that hopefully it's much shorter lived. But how far do you think earnings are going to be down?
Yeah, look, I think this is the key question, and it's extremely topical as we're heading into the thick of the earnings season. And to me, I think that there are really, to me, the really key factor here is how much do you think of the earnings fall you get back next year? Because I think markets are forward-looking, and that if the declines that we get in 2020 are only going to come back in 2021, then I think the market shouldn't necessarily sell off that much on the back of those issues, right? Equity markets are forward discounting mechanisms. Equities represent the value of all your future cash flows. And so all of that is, I think, less permanent if those earnings come back. And if I look at our forecast in the U.S., we do think a lot of the earnings that we lose this year do come back next year. So we're down 20% in earnings in 2020, but earnings are up 20% on that lower base in 2021. In Europe, that's where our analysts are somewhat more cautious that the earnings end up in 2021 still about 15% lower than where they ended 2019. So there's a little bit more permanent earnings destruction in Europe relative to the U.S.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Europe, basically, are you going to be able to see the rebound as swiftly, as strongly as in the US and China? I think that will be really key. Where do you see opportunities then? Are there opportunities at this point now for you?
Well, we still think volatility can fall further. I think that would be very consistent with the aggressive central bank action that we're seeing. I think that would be very consistent with the idea that the market kind of first passes a peak level of uncertainty and then kind of spends more time focusing on, well, what's the right level of earnings, of defaults, of things that would affect the fundamental price of securities. And I think if we look at things on a cross-asset basis, expectations for volatility are still very high relative to a lot of other markets, relative to credit spreads, equity valuation, other factors. So we still think equity expectations for equity volatility can fall a lot further.
All right. Well, it's great to get you on the program. Great to get your take, Andrew. You'll be going on Bloomberg Surveillance next. So I just want to tell our listeners that if you're tuned in on London DAB, you'll hear more from Andrew Sheets, Chief Cross-Asset Strategist at Morgan Stanley. If you aren't and you want to hear more from Andrew, then you can just flip on the TV or on your Bloomberg type TV Go to watch Surveillance and watch Andrew talk with Tom and Francine. I'll just wrap up quickly, Caroline. In terms of the markets right now, we are looking at a FTSE that has been bouncing around gains and losses. Currently it's up, but just barely keeping its head above water. Other European equity indexes are up 1% and change. In fact, the FTSE MIB in Milan is up more than 2% right now. And we have U.S. futures that are rising. This is Bloomberg.
Portfolio. Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
At Asda, we're doing all that we can to keep shelves full and prices low. So you can pick up a 7-pack of Grower Selection bananas or 400 grams of seedless red grapes, both just £1 each. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, April 16th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
As worldwide COVID-19 cases pass 2 million, there's hope we're past the worst in the U.S.
We await new guidelines from the White House to relax stay-at-home rules as soon as today.
President Trump threatens to force both houses of Congress to adjourn in a nominee fight. Plus, air travel at New York City airports nearly disappears. I'm Mike Lamar. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. We'll hear from the new Giants coach, Joe Judge, as he gets ready for next week's NFL Draft.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
U.S. futures and European stocks rebounding from yesterday's losses. 5:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 15 points. Dow futures up 101. NASDAQ futures up 65. The DAX in Germany is up 1.1%. CAC in Paris up 1%. And the FTSE 100 down 0.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 1 1/3%, while the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury down 3/30 seconds, yield 0.64%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.20%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.1% or 41 cents at $20.28 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $15.20 at $17.55.30 an ounce. The euro 1.0886 against the dollar, and the yen is at 107.73. Nathan.
Karen, coronavirus cases around the world have surpassed 2 million. Here in the U.S., infections number 640,000 and nearly 31,000 1,000 have died, but we may be past the peak. That's according to the White House.
The battle continues, but the data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. Hopefully that will continue, and we will continue to make great progress.
And that has President Trump preparing guidelines for relaxing stay-at-home rules. Details are expected today.
Sometime during the afternoon, we're going to be announcing guidelines, and we'll be talking about various states, and it's very exciting.
The president says he'll discuss next steps with governors on the phone today, following tensions with states over how to reopen the economy.
There are questions about how the process will work. We spoke with Suzanne Clark, president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's been advising the White House.
This is going to be a multi-layered path to recovery. And if you look at what we've seen in the past during this crisis, this is exactly what's happened. You've had federal guidelines and then local decision-making. So an example would be the White House defining essential businesses, the CDC then putting out guidelines about how you protect those essential workers, and then states implementing policies specific to their on-the-ground conditions.
That raises the possibility of states in the Midwest getting back to work shortly while restrictions linger for coastal communities where the outbreak is most severe.
The White House is also getting advice from corporate leaders, holding conference calls with more than 200 executives to get their opinions on restarting the economy. Here with details is Martin DeCaro from our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington.
Sources tell us CEOs across the country told President Trump he needs robust testing in place before sending Americans back to work. A person briefed on the call says the president told executives he may soon announce a new saliva test for COVID-19. Trump told CEOs they might need to enact social distancing measures in the workplace and have employees wear masks in order to reopen. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Martin, thank you. We get more on the economic toll from the outbreak today. With weekly data on unemployment claims, economists predict 5.5 million Americans filed for benefits last week. Here with more is Bloomberg economics correspondent Michael McKee.
If the consensus forecast is realized, that would push the 4-week total above 22 million, roughly 1 in 8 of the workforce. That would essentially wipe out all the job gains since the last recession. Given claims are expected to stay in the millions for several more weeks, unemployment above 15%, even close to 20% is possible for April. That would be the highest since the Depression. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Michael, thanks. Small business is reeling in the face of the pandemic, and the loan program to help them could run out of funds as soon as today. For details, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
Yeah, good morning, Nathan. Sources tell us the $350 billion relief program was set to run out of money as soon as last night. The small business loans are available on a first-come, first-served basis. Firms have flooded banks with applications, but many won't get aid without additional funding. Republicans in Congress pushed for an additional $250 billion for the program last week, but the effort stalled when Democrats requested changes to the measure and more aid for other groups. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. As the pandemic weighs on Main Street, Wall Street looks to quantify the impact with another round of earnings. We get the final results from big U.S. banks today when Morgan Stanley reports. Here with the preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
A strong start to the year in wealth assets and equities should aid Morgan Stanley's revenue in the first quarter. But Bloomberg Intelligence notes that the focus is on the outlook for margin and volume amid price declines, wider credit spreads, and volatility toward the end of the quarter. Analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are forecasting a profit of about $1.14 per share, down 15% from a year ago. Revenue is expected to decline 6% to about $9.7 billion. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thank you. And we'll speak with the CEO of Morgan Stanley following those results. Tune in for an interview with James Gorman at 10 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television.
Well, oil continues to trade near an 18-year low as the coronavirus pandemic saps demand. Now sources tell us the White House is thinking of paying U.S. producers not to pump crude. Mike McGlone covers oil for Bloomberg Intelligence.
U.S. gasoline demand dropped almost 60%. Now, that's short term, but it might not come back to where it was before. Crude oil is a big example of just how bad this demand destruction is globally.
Now, checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate's back above $20 a barrel, up 2.25% at $20.32. Brent is higher by 2.6% at $28.41 a barrel. S&P futures are higher by almost 9 points now. Dow futures up 57. NASDAQ futures a gain of 51 points. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. And at 5:07 on Wall Street, let's bring in Michael Barr for the latest world and national news headlines. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump threatened to try to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. It's an unprecedented move that would likely raise a constitutional challenge so that he can make appointments to government jobs without Senate approval. The president says perhaps it's never been done before. Nobody is even sure it has, but we're going to do it. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says his state is hitting the plateau or apex of COVID-19 hospitalizations and new cases, but urges New Yorkers to keep at it with social distancing and stay-at-home orders. Governor Cuomo also says more testing is needed to get New York reopened for business. New York has tested for COVID-19 the most, but Cuomo says it's not enough to reopen the state.
In all this time, we've only done 500,000 tests. Now, that's a large number of tests. Yes, but this is over 1 month period. And even 500,000 tests. You're talking about a state with 19 million people.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says his city won't consider reopening the economy unless three main indicators for COVID-19 hit downward trends for 10 to 14 days. New ICU patients, rates of hospitalization, and new COVID-19 cases are now tracked daily in New York City. De Blasio says over the last 3 days, his team has been tracking these numbers, and they've shown a mixed bag of both improvement and increases.
We're still in the throes of this crisis. And I said many, many times April was going to be tough. Be ready for May to be tough too. We just have to keep understanding that. Even if we see some improvement, even if we see some positive signs, we're far from out of the woods.
Traveling in New York City by air has almost disappeared. According to figures at New York City airports, it is down over 90%. New York Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is pitching a borrowing plan to help make up for billions of dollars of lost revenue in the current and next budget amid a virus-induced lockdown. The New Jersey COVID-19 Emergency Bond Act, outlined in draft legislation seen by Bloomberg, would authorize the Murphy administration to issue general obligation bonds and emergency liquidity notes and apply for loans from the federal government. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and powered by Quick Take, and more than 2,700 journalists and analysts from more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks for coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. Good morning, John.
All right, good morning, Nathan. The pro sports leagues continue to plan for a possible return. Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred telling the Associated Press they have to be ready to go as soon as public health officials give them the okay. They all got the okay from an important person yesterday. Dr. Anthony Fauci, in an interview on Snapchat, said sports leagues should return, but without fans and with constant testing of the players. The first active NFL player to test positive, L.A. Rams center Brian Allen. The NFL will reportedly release its 2020 schedule in about 3 weeks, but they are building in virus-related contingencies. An NFL draft that will be unlike any other starts a week from tonight, not in Las Vegas as it was supposed to be, but from Bronxville and Roger Goodell's basement. New Giants coach Joe Judge will also be in his basement.
I'm not looking to make this a vacation for anybody. We've got a lot of serious work to get done, but it is still our house, and like everyone else in America is finding out, everyone's working with their family, always present, and that's pretty true for us. I got a golden retriever sits on the couch next to me for about 15 hours a day. So, right now she could probably tell you more about who we're going to take in the first round than anybody else.
The Giants have the 4th pick next Thursday night. Clemson pass rusher Isaiah Simmons could be their guy, or they might go with an offensive lineman. The Jets have the 11th pick. The WNBA draft is tomorrow. New York Liberty have the first pick. Will almost certainly take Oregon star Sabrina Ionescu. The Liberty just made a big trade. They sent their top player Tina Charles to Washington. She'll go to the WNBA champs. 3-way deal with Detroit. The Liberty got back 2 players and 3 more first-round picks. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are higher right now by 10 points. Dow futures up 62. NASDAQ futures a gain of 50 points. DAX in Germany is higher by 1%. 10 years down, 132nd, yield 0.63%. 2-year Treasury yield 0.20%. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and you know, when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these
City.
and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Rishad Salamat.
The International Monetary Fund saying that economic growth in the Asia-Pacific will likely slow to a standstill this year, something that hasn't happened in the last 6 decades. The fund is also urging governments to utilize all policy options to support their economies
during this pandemic, including bilateral and multilateral swap arrangements. Now let's bring in Chang Yong Ri, Asia and Pacific Department Director at the IMF. Thank you so much for joining us. What's your basic hypothesis as to what's going on now with all these linkages that are at the moment in place, and are governments doing enough?
Yes, actually, I think it's quite astonishing that Asia's growth rate in 2020 is expected to be 0%. And actually, in the last 60 years, Asia has not experienced zero growth. And so I think this is very unprecedented time. We think that this is, Asian policymaker has to use whatever arsenal they have to fight for this temporary crisis.
But is the level of trillions of dollars of stimulus affordable here? Is there a risk of fueling financial risk?
At this moment, I think we already see there are significant capital outflow from the region. But given that loose monetary policy in advanced economies, I think the liquidity in general will be ample, even in Asia.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are rising alongside U.S. stock index futures as investors await the next set of corporate earnings and economic data. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 12 points this morning. Dow futures up 89. NASDAQ futures up 62. The DAX in Germany's up 1.1%. 10-year Treasury down 132nd yields 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.20%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1.6%, up 31 cents at $20.18 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $14.70 at $17.54.90 an ounce. The euro is at 1.0875 against the dollar. British pound 1.2473, and the yen's at 107.79. Today we are watching for earnings from companies including Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, and Abbott Labs. And we also get the weekly number on initial jobless claims at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with housing starts and building permits. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. President Donald Trump threatened to try to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. It would be an unprecedented move that would likely raise a constitutional challenge so that he can make appointments to government jobs without Senate approval. New guidelines expected soon from President Trump are aiming to ease restrictions in areas with low transmission of the coronavirus. Current social distancing guidelines would remain in place for harder hit states. But business leaders are telling the president they need more coronavirus testing and personal protective equipment before people can safely go back to work. The industry executives are cautioning President Trump that the return to normalcy will be anything but swift. While Trump's guidelines are expected to be announced today, the ultimate decisions will be remaining with the governors. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak, and Matt Maley's back with us this morning, Chief Market Strategist at Miller Tabak. Good morning, Matt. Still a lot of choppiness in this market, particularly this week, with a lot of ups and downs for the S&P 500 particularly. What are you going to be looking for to see whether we can get a sustainable rally in this market?
Well, I mean, obviously, a lot of it's going to depend on what we see in terms of how the economy is going to come out of this whole healthcare crisis. I mean, one of the things that what we saw before going in was that the stock market was kind of priced for perfection. As we come out of this crisis, I mean, it's going to be, I think, a rather gradual one, and I think it's going to be hard for us to rally a whole lot more than we already have, to be perfectly honest with you. I just think there's too much certainty out there, and I mean, the pullback yesterday, there was some bad news out there, but we also have to realize the market had rallied 27% in just 3 weeks, so it was getting vulnerable to any kind of bad news anyway. And then when we got some of these data reports and some earnings reports, and of course the drop in oil, it wasn't a surprise that we pulled back.
Now, of course, we're going to get initial jobless claims later on this morning. Those numbers have been brutal over the last several weeks. Do you think the market has fully priced in the economic damage from this coronavirus outbreak?
I really don't. I mean, we look at one of the things we really concern ourselves is with, what will the economy do in 2021? What will earnings be? And a lot of people say, kind of forget about 2020. We know that's going to be horrible, but it was artificially created, and we should come out of it relatively quickly. And that's fine. But we have to remember that back in 2018 and 2019, remember 2019 earnings were flat. The S&P earned about $163. Right now, we're hearing estimates on the bullish side at $150. So earnings are going to be lower in 2000. They'll be much better than 2020, of course, but they're still going to be lower than 2019 and 2018. How does the stock market rally significantly above the levels they stood in those years, with the fundamentals really not bouncing back all that strongly? So I do think that when you have bear markets are different than corrections, and you tend to have several ways of selling.
Well, where do you see earnings going now that we've heard from most of the big U.S. banks, and we're going to be hearing from the rest of the sectors as the earnings season goes forward? I mean, how big a hit do you think we're going to get in earnings in this quarter?
I mean, it's almost impossible to know for the full year of 2020. I mean, I think you see a lot of people looking, at $100, $100 to $120. So it's going to be a significant change from the 163 that we got last year in 2019. The key is how fast will it come back, and I just believe that the economy, with the way that people, it's going to be kind of, are people really going to go back and fly on planes to the same degree that they were? Are they going to go to restaurants to the same degree that they were? And also, what are they going to do about savings? I mean, before this crisis, 40% of Americans didn't have $1,000 to spend on an emergency. I think people are going to want that now. And so some of their spending may not go into consumption. It may be stuck in the bank, even though it's giving them, basically paying them nothing. They still know that they need something for these kind of emergencies, and I think there'll be a little bit less spending.
All that said, do you think we retest the lows in equities from last month?
I think the chances of that are quite good. Most people, it was funny, a week and a half ago, I was saying that, but I was concerned that too many people were saying the same thing, and I was too much in the consensus. But now a lot of people have walked away from that, and I do think that there's a very good chance, because I just don't think we're going to get the kind of a rebound. Again, during corrections, you tend to get one liquidation phase, and when people realize that we're not going to have a recession, they keep buying. And during bear markets, you get a liquidation phase, a bounce back, and then when people say, oh my gosh, we are going to have a recession, which doesn't happen in every bear market, but if that does seem to be the case this time, then you see that second wave when people realize that the economy is not going to bounce back to the degree it had during, like for instance, 2018 and 2016.
All right, Matt, we'll leave it there for now. Always good talking with you. Thanks so much. That's Matt Maley, Chief Market Strategist at Miller Tabak. As we await the jobless claims data for this week, they're coming out 8:30 Wall Street time. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg predict another 5.5 million jobless claims on top of the millions of the last couple of weeks. Also awaiting earnings from Morgan Stanley later this morning. We'll have full coverage of it all for you throughout the day here on Bloomberg Radio. Head of the open, futures positive. S&P futures higher by 9 points. Dow futures up 55. NASDAQ futures higher by 54 points. 10-year is little changed. The yield at 0.63%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The volatility continues as U.S. investors take stock of a lower close yesterday. Shares tumbled on Wall Street following gloomy economic data in the U.S. Retail sales and factory output posted historic declines in March, and April surveys looked even worse, with home builder sentiment plunging and a New York gauge of manufacturing plummeting. The S&P 500 was down just over 2% yesterday. President Donald Trump says his administration today will detail new guidelines for reopening the economy
economy, working with states to open them in stages and beginning with those states that have relatively few cases of COVID-19. A $349 billion federal relief program for small businesses is expected to run out of money soon, with many still waiting to get a lifeline. As of mid-afternoon yesterday, the Small Business Administration said there had been more than 1.4 million applications approved, totaling about $305 billion in loans set aside for businesses. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years.
The pressure washer that means your patio is barbecue ready. The 4K projector that brings the thrill of the cinema to you. The yoga mat that turns your lounge into a studio. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of your leisure time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency. Life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise, or to work. But only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it, and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Right now, TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre is just £25.50 a month, fixed for 18 months. Plus, you get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Over 80 Freeview channels, all the on-demand players, and average speeds of 38 megabits per second. Plus, unlimited one-day delivery, thousands of movies, TV shows, and more from Amazon. Massive entertainment package, tiny price. See if more to spend on popcorn? Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk, for everyone. Offer ends 22nd of April, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date in the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining as President Trump ramps up plans to get America back to work. As U.S. COVID-19 infections hit 640,000, we may be past the peak. That according to the White House.
The battle continues, but the data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. Hopefully that will continue, and we will continue to make great progress.
And that has President Trump preparing guidelines to relax stay-at-home rules. Details are expected today.
Sometime during the afternoon, we're going to be announcing guidelines, and we'll be talking about various states, and it's very exciting.
The president's getting advice on restarting the economy from corporate leaders holding conference calls with more than 200 executives. Sources say he told CEOs they might need social distancing measures in the workplace and have employees wear masks. We spoke with U.S. Chamber of Commerce President Suzanne Clark, who's advising the White House.
We're looking at new processes, that CEOs will have new restrictions, that there'll be new requirements, and even new risks. So every CEO is asking those questions.
A person briefed on the call says CEOs told President Trump he needs robust testing in place before sending Americans back to work.
Well, we get more on the economic toll from the outbreak today. With weekly data on unemployment claims, economists predict 5.5 million Americans filed for benefits last week. If that number holds, the April unemployment rate could hit 15%.
As the pandemic weighs on Main Street, Wall Street looks to quantify the impact with another round of earnings. We get the final results from big U.S. banks today when Morgan Stanley reports. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with more. Good morning, John.
Hey, good morning, Karen. Morgan Stanley's revenue expected to decline 6%. Earnings may be 15% lower than last year. Focus is going to be on the firm's asset management division. It's been generating more revenue recently. So far, banks reporting this week had their best trading quarter in 8 years. And after those results, we speak with Morgan Stanley CEO James Gorman. Tune in for that interview, 10 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are higher this morning, up 10 points. Dow futures up 64, NASDAQ futures up 55. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.63%, and the yield on the 2 years at 0.20%. 30-year yield 1.25%. And NYMEX crude oil at $20.09 a barrel. That's up 1.1% or 22 cents. The euro 1.0863 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr for more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. President Donald Trump threatened to try to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. It's an unprecedented move that would likely raise a constitutional challenge. During an adjournment, presidents can make temporary appointments without Senate approval. But presidents can't make recess appointments when the Senate adjourns for only a few days. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says there are some signs that his state is seeing signs that social distancing is working in the battle against COVID-19. In his daily briefing, Cuomo says hospitalization rates, new ICU admissions, and new incubations of patients are showing downward trends. Cuomo says it's promising, but says New Yorkers shouldn't ignore social distancing mandates.
We're still in the woods. The good news is we showed that we can change the curve. Good news is, great news in my opinion, we can control the spread. That is great news. Because can you imagine if we couldn't control the spread? If we did all this and the spread kept going up?
Cuomo signed an executive order requiring face covering statewide for people who are going outside. Meanwhile, a nonprofit is taking the medicine on the road to treat the most vulnerable people in the city, the homeless. Dr. Amy Edelstein is clinical director for the Project Renewal medical van. Project Renewal runs 7 shelters in conjunction with the city's Department of Homeless Services. Dr. Edelstein says the shelters have made changes to try to encourage social distancing.
In particular in the homeless shelters where we can't always social distance everybody, we really need masks for those in the shelters so that we can try to protect each other and protect the homeless people who really need a place to stay from infecting each other themselves.
Air travel in New York City's airports almost disappeared in March while traffic on the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey's bridges and tunnels plummeted after the COVID-19 pandemic prompted travel restrictions. Average weekday air passengers dropped by 96% for the week of March 30th to April 3rd compared to the weekday average in March of 2019. The FDA modified its stance on COVID-19 and vaping, saying it has an unknown effect on the risk of the coronavirus, while warning that smoking can create worse outcomes. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update live with John Stashauer. John?
All right, Nathan. Dr. Anthony Fauci has, of course, been answering coronavirus-related questions for weeks now. In a Snapchat interview, he was asked about sports coming back. He's in favor of it, but said there should be no fans, and the players must be surveilled and tested often. If college football wants to play with fans, might have to wait until 2021. Believe it or not, there have been rumors of college football moving its season from February to May unless they have 2 seasons in 1 year. The NFL draft is next week. First round week from tonight. Giants have the 4th pick. Their rookie head coach is Joe Judge.
I think that when you're looking at players in the draft, first off, you're always looking for the best player available. And to me, that means long-term upside. If you think you're taking someone who's so on pro-ready, what all these rookies find out the second they step in the building is none of them are pro-ready. That's why they need the spring program. That's why they need training camp. That's why they go through growing pains as rookies.
Jets have the 11th pick, the Bengals the 1st. They're expected to take LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. NFL Hall of Famer Willie Davis died at 85, began his career in Cleveland. Typical Browns, they traded him to Green Bay for a receiver who had 1 catch for them. Davis with the Packers never missed a game in 10 years, a 5-time All-Pro defensive lineman for the Green Bay dynasty of the 1960s. Nice gesture by Curtis Granderson, the ex-Met, ex-Yankee, donated 42,000 meals to the coronavirus-related food bank. 42 because it was on Jackie Robinson Day. On April 16th, this date in sports history, 1940, Bob Feller with what 80 years later is still the only opening day no-hitter. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Okay, John, thanks. 5:37 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is pitching a borrowing plan to help make up for billions of dollars of lost revenue. The New Jersey COVID-19 Emergency Bond Act would authorize the Murphy administration to issue general obligation bonds and emergency liquidity notes. It would also call for applying for loans from the federal government. Well, New York City could lose 500,000 jobs and run about $10 billion short on tax revenue through mid-2021 because of the coronavirus outbreak. The city's independent budget office says retail employment will take the biggest hit. The sector is expected to shed 100,000 jobs. Lex Markets is a startup that allows investors to make small bets on commercial real estate. It's added 2 new board members recently. Alicia Glenn is a former deputy mayor of New York, and Marty Edelman is an attorney at Paul Hastings. Both are joining the company as directors. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
All right, Ed, thank you. 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WPVN in Columbus, I'm reporting Spirit Airlines is seeking to cut service to Columbus until the coronavirus pandemic is over.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on 1010 Wins in New York, we're talking about Bed Bath & Beyond rethinking its store footprint even after a better-than-expected quarter.
I'm Caroline Hetgill, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on retail sales that show how badly the UK economy has suffered so far in the virus pandemic.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. The Trump administration is considering paying oil companies to leave crude in the ground.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting China car sales are up for the first time since the coronavirus lockdown.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Some other stories we're following: a bullish call on gold from the head of the world's top miner. Newmont CEO Tom Palmer tells Bloomberg gold could top $2,000 an ounce. He expects the metal to remain elevated over the next 5 years as the global economy contends with coronavirus. United Airlines is warning employees of long-term job cuts. The airline says travel demand is essentially zero and shows no sign of improvement in the near term. United plans to further cut flights to roughly 10% of the capacity planned for this year. And the parent company of Google will slow hiring for the rest of this year. It is the most drastic action Alphabet has taken yet in the coronavirus crisis. The fallout has battered its advertising business. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. The cover is on how Zoom became critical work-at-home infrastructure almost overnight. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription to Business Week at MAG Go. Plus, listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio and watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time at youtube.com. Search Bloomberg Global News. This is Daybreak.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is your...
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
On air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. President Trump says he will unveil new guidelines today, meant to begin the process of reopening the country. Trump concedes final decisions on when to reopen parts of the economy will fall to individual governors.
We have the right to do whatever we want, but we wouldn't do that. But no, we would have the right to close down what they're doing if we want to do that. but we don't want to do that. And I don't think there'll be any reason to do that, but we have the right to do that.
Government relief checks are arriving in Americans' bank accounts as the damage to the U.S. economy piles up. American industrial output shriveled in March. Retail sales fell by an unprecedented 8.7%. Asian stocks are mostly lower after weak U.S. retail and manufacturing added to global gloom over the impact of the pandemic. Dow futures are lower, down nearly 2%. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the head count?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks are rising alongside U.S. stock index futures as investors await the next set of corporate earnings and economic data. The dollar extending gains. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 16 points. Dow futures up 99. NASDAQ futures up 72. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.20%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.5% or 29 cents at $20.16 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.7% or $12.20 at $17.52.40 an ounce. The euro 1.0865 against the dollar. British pound 1.2471 and the yen's at 107.76. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Trump said he will unveil guidelines to relax stay-at-home rules today, citing signs that the coronavirus outbreak is plateauing in parts of the country. Trump has been eager to ease social distancing measures that have caused businesses nationwide to shutter, costing more than 16 million Americans their jobs in the past month. Iranian ships repeatedly harassed and approached American vessels conducting operations in the Persian Gulf before disengaging after multiple warnings. That's according to U.S. Central Command, who says 11 ships with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps repeatedly crossed the bows and sterns of the American vessels at extremely close range and high speed yesterday. Bangladesh's Coast Guard has rescued 382 starving Rohingya refugees who had been drifting at sea for weeks after failing to reach Malaysia. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
All right, Michael, thank you. It is now 5:49 on Wall Street. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. Another round of earnings today. We're going to get the final results from big U.S. banks when Morgan Stanley reports before the bell. Let's get a preview now. We're joined by Bloomberg Global Finance correspondent Shanali Bassick. Well, let's start with trading for Morgan Stanley because that has been the big headline from the banks that have reported so far. In fact, they had their best quarter, in 8 years?
Yeah, it was a knockout trading quarter, and that was because volumes were skyrocketing. There was so much turmoil and so much volatility, but
there's always a but.
There's always a but. For most of the firms, the consumer businesses really were such a problem that it outshined any good trading performance. At Goldman Sachs, where there's much smaller of a consumer business, same case for Morgan Stanley today, they might be able to shine a little more. Goldman Sachs ended up on the day yesterday.
Because of the trading, and like you say, it wasn't offset by the loan loss provisions because that's not a big business for them. How else is Morgan Stanley different?
Morgan Stanley has one of the biggest wealth managers, right? So they have a massive wealth manager. There's going to be a lot of questions about how their clients are behaving in the face of all of this turmoil. So at Goldman, for example, much smaller business in wealth, much smaller business in consumer, but they saw a 39% jump. People are depositing a lot of money and because they want to save cash. While
Morgan Stanley has moved into asset management more recently. It generated more of the revenue from asset management recently, right?
Right. So interestingly, for Morgan Stanley, it's got $5 to I think it's maybe $8 billion now. I forget how much exactly it is. It's sub $1 trillion. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs have a couple $1 trillion of assets under their asset managers. And Goldman takes proprietary bets, so they bet their own money when they're investing. Morgan Stanley's a little smaller. They want it to be a lot bigger, and it has been getting bigger.
I just want to focus on the sustainability of the things that have stood out and whether or not that can continue for the firms, including Morgan Stanley today.
So that's the question, and it's a question that executives are pretty reticent to answer because they don't know.
Because they don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
and who knows, right? And who knows not only how long it'll take for the economy to reopen, but then how long unemployment will stay high, and then how long it'll take for GDP to start to recover. And then what are the second legs of the coronavirus going to look like? And so those are the big uncertainties. And the executives have been pretty good at saying, listen, we're planning for the worst, hoping for the best, and these are what our worst case scenarios may look like.
Switch gears just a bit. Do we have any more clarity on dividends? Are they safe for investors right now with these firms?
They would like to keep them safe right now. JP Morgan even said they have people who depend on it. And so there's not a risk at the immediate term to the dividends, but if things get really bad is when we can see them starting to be reduced.
And how well is everybody capitalized at this point? I saw a headline earlier from the Fed's Neil Kashkari suggesting that banks would have to raise more capital or something along those lines.
The weaker ones, smaller banks, is a question mark how they're going to fare.
The regionals.
Yeah, that's the question. And will they have to merge or do other things to shore up any capital? But the big banks right now, flush with capital, they are liquid. Again, they've been stress testing themselves many times what the government has been doing. So they don't want to come out of this crisis looking like they did in the last.
We're going to hear from the head of Morgan Stanley, James Gorman, around 10 o'clock, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, so tune in for that. What would you like to hear from him, or what questions would you have for him?
What you asked earlier, the sustainability of a lot of these results, how does he keep it up? Any market share gains or losses? So we did see fixed income trading at Goldman and JP Morgan rise well over 30% yesterday. Can Morgan Stanley keep track with that, and can they keep gaining share? Morgan Stanley is a leader in electronic businesses. So have they been able to, is that the new normal now? Is their workforce going to be completely remote in the longer term, even beyond this coronavirus?
Great. Bloomberg Global Finance Correspondent Shonali Bosick. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Again, results from Morgan Stanley due out about an hour from now. We're going to bring you the headlines, followed by instant analysis throughout the morning right here on Bloomberg Radio. Karen.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. It's brought to you by American Arbitration Association. International trade or business dispute resolved faster with the International Center for Dispute Resolution, the leader in alternative dispute resolution around the world, ICDR.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Several groups that represent physicians say Congress should give doctors more time to repay loans received from Medicare in response to the coronavirus emergency. The Ninth Circuit affirmed that Wells Fargo's compensation method for mortgage brokers violated rest break requirements in California, but part of a damage award was stayed pending a state Supreme Court decision on another case. In Kentucky, lawmakers overrode a veto by the governor and made distilleries and breweries eligible for state tax breaks on certain new equipment.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story. We're following a power struggle between the White House and state governors. President Trump says he has absolute power to end the coronavirus shutdown, but that claim runs into constitutional limits laid out in the 10th Amendment. For more on the issue, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with Richard Berfault, a professor at Columbia Law School.
Rich, what does the Constitution say about the president's claim of absolute power over the states?
Well, of course, the Constitution doesn't address anything like that, and there's really nothing in the Constitution that would support that. President is vested with executive authority, but that's with respect to the federal government. President is given really no direct powers over the states at all, except to implement those kinds of powers that Congress might give him. Obviously, the president has power dealing with national security and foreign affairs, but But for the kind of domestic things that the states are doing, our local businesses going to be open, our local schools going to be open, that's the kind of thing that has traditionally a matter for the states to decide, as they've been doing over the past month.
Because it's the public health, do the states have a particular purview over the public health?
Yes, the federal government is a government of limited powers, and this is the position that conservatives have always emphasized. It does have the power to regulate commerce, and of course, obviously, coronavirus has a big impact on commerce, but that all the basic powers of government, including power over public health and public safety, are powers that are wielded at the state level, until perhaps Congress, if it uses its commerce power, might take something away. But the assumption is that basically all the governing power in the United States starts at the state level. Some things can be moved up by Congress to the national level. Some things have been delegated by the states to their cities. But the key assumption of our system is that the states are the basic blocks of government.
Trump declared a national emergency. Explain why that doesn't give him the powers he's trying to claim and what powers it does give him.
A national emergency is something that basically is something pursuant to various acts of Congress that gives the president certain emergency powers with respect to areas in the federal system. Reallocate funds to call into play the Defense Production Act. I mean, Congress can give the president power to deal with emergencies. The irony here is I think the president might have been in a better position to use emergency powers to shut things down. It's not clear he has any particular power to order things up. I mean, if a state decides it wants to close its school system, the president has no power to say it's got to be open. When if a state decides it wants to close its government offices, the president has no power. The state is issuing orders to businesses that you want to close. The president doesn't have the power to say, no, you have to be open.
And that's Columbia law professor Richard Berfald speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures are up about 14 points. Dow futures up 82. NASDAQ futures up 66. And the 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.63%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £47 million in prizes so far this year. And it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of April to play in the May draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus, conditions apply, play responsibly.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5 and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
At Asda, we're doing all that we can to keep shelves full and prices low. So you can pick up a 7-pack of Grower Selection bananas or 400 grams of seedless red grapes, both just £1 each. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability.
This is a message from the government. Coronavirus is a national emergency, life-threatening for people of all ages everywhere in the UK. To help save lives, you must stay home. Only go outside for food, health reasons, daily exercise or to work, but only if you cannot work from home. Stay home. Anyone can get it and anyone can spread it. Stay home to help protect the NHS and frontline staff working to save lives. Coronavirus. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, April 16th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
As worldwide COVID-19 cases pass 2 million, there's hope we're past the worst in the U.S.
Data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases.
We await new guidelines from the White House to relax stay-at-home rules as soon as today.
President Trump threatens to force both houses of Congress to adjourn in a nominee fight. Plus, air travel at New York City airports nearly disappears. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashauer in sports. We'll hear from the new Giants coach Joe Judge as he gets ready for next week's NFL draft.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures and European stocks rebounding from yesterday's losses. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 16 points. Dow futures up 99. NASDAQ futures up 72. The DAX in Germany's up 0.9%. CAC in Paris up 0.7%. And the FTSE 100 little change, down almost 0.1%. Nikkei 225 in Japan fell 1.33%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was down 0.6%. 10-year Treasury little change, yield 0.63%. The yield on the 2-year 0.20%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.6% or 31 cents at $20.18 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.8% or $13.30 at $17.5360 an ounce. The euro 1.0871 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.72. Nathan.
Well, Karen, coronavirus cases around the world have now passed 2 million, and here in the U.S., infections number 640,000. Nearly 31,000 have died, but we may be past the peak. That's according to the White House.
The battle continues, but the data suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. Hopefully that will continue, and we will continue to make great progress.
And that has President Trump preparing guidelines for relaxing stay-at-home rules. Details are expected today.
Sometime during the afternoon, we're going to be announcing guidelines, and we'll be talking about various states, and it's very exciting.
The president says he'll discuss next steps with governors on the phone today following tensions with states over how to reopen the economy.
There are questions about how the process will work. We spoke with Suzanne Clark, president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who's been advising the White House.
This is going to be a multi-layered path to recovery. And if you look at what we've seen in the past during this crisis, this is exactly what's happened. You've had federal guidelines and then local decision making. So an example would be the White House defining essential businesses, the CDC then putting out guidelines about how you protect those essential workers, and then states implementing policies specific to their on-the-ground conditions.
And that raises the possibility of states in the Midwest getting back to work shortly while restrictions linger for coastal communities where the outbreak is most severe.
The White House is also getting advice from corporate leaders, holding conference calls with more than 200 executives to get opinions on restarting the economy. And here with details is Martin DeCaro from our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington.
Sources tell us CEOs across the country told President Trump he needs robust testing in place before sending Americans back to work. A person briefed on the call says the president told executives he may soon announce a new saliva test for COVID-19. Trump told CEOs they might need to enact social distancing measures in the workplace and have employees wear masks in order to reopen. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Martin, thank you. We get more on the economic toll from the outbreak today with weekly data on unemployment claims. Economists predict 5.5 million Americans filed for benefits last week. And here with more is Bloomberg economics correspondent Michael McKee.
If the consensus forecast is realized, that would push the 4-week total above 22 million, roughly 1 in 8 of the workforce. That would essentially wipe out all the job gains since the last recession. Given claims are expected to stay in the millions for several more weeks, unemployment above 15%, even close to 20% is possible for April. That would be the highest since the Depression. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Michael, thank you. Small business is reeling in the face of the pandemic, and the loan program aimed at helping them could run out of funds as soon as today. For details, we're joined live by Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And good morning, Nathan. Sources tell us the $350 billion relief program was set to run out of money as soon as last night. The small business loans are available on a first-come, first-served basis. Firms have flooded banks with applications, but many won't get aid without additional funding. Republicans in Congress pushed for an additional $250 billion for the program last week, but the effort stalled when Democrats requested changes to the measure and more aid for other groups. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. As the pandemic weighs on Main Street, Wall Street looks to quantify the impact with another round of earnings. We get the final results from big U.S. banks today when Morgan Stanley reports. And here with the preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
A strong start to the year in wealth assets and equities should aid Morgan Stanley's revenue in the first quarter. But Bloomberg Intelligence notes that the focus is on the outlook for margin and volume amid price declines, wider credit spreads, and volatility toward the end of the quarter. Analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are forecasting a profit of about $1.14 per share, down 15% from a year ago. Revenue is expected to decline 6% to about $9.7 billion. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thank you. And we speak with the CEO of Morgan Stanley following those results. Tune in for an interview with James Gorman at 10 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
Now, oil continues to trade near an 18-year low as the coronavirus pandemic saps demand. Now sources tell us the White House is thinking of paying U.S. producers not to pump crude. Mike McGlone covers oil for Bloomberg Intelligence.
U.S. gasoline demand dropped almost 60%. Now, that's short term, but it might not come back to where it was before. Crude oil is a big example of just how bad this demand destruction is globally.
Well, checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate crude is higher by 1.9% or 38 cents at $20.24 a barrel. Brent is up 2.8% at $28.47.
S&P futures are up 9 points this morning. Dow futures up 49 and NASDAQ futures up 55. The 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.62%. And the yield on the 2 years at 0.19%. The 30-year yield 1.25%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thanks. It's 6:07 now on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is back with us for a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump threatened to try to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. It's an unprecedented move that would likely raise a constitutional challenge so that he can make appointments to government jobs without Senate approval. The president says perhaps it never has been done before. Nobody is even sure it has, but we are going to do it. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says his state is hitting the plateau or apex of COVID-19 hospitalizations and new cases, but urges New Yorkers to keep at it with social distancing and stay-at-home orders. Governor Cuomo also says more testing is needed to get New York reopened for business. New York has tested for COVID-19 the most, but Cuomo says it's not enough to reopen the state.
In all this time, we've only done 500,000 tests. Now, that's a large number of tests. Yes, but this is over a 1 month period. And even 500,000 tests. You're talking about a state with 19 million people.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says his city won't consider reopening the economy unless three main indicators for COVID-19 hit downward trends for 10 to 14 days. New ICU patients, rates of hospitalization, and new COVID-19 cases are now tracked daily in New York City. De Blasio says over the last 3 days, his team has been tracking these numbers, and they've shown a mixed bag of both improvement and increases.
We're still in the throes of this crisis. And I said many, many times April was going to be tough. Be ready for May to be tough too. We just have to keep understanding that. Even if we see some improvement, even if we see some positive signs, we're far from out of the woods.
Air travel in New York City's airports almost disappeared in March because of COVID-19. Average weekday aviation passengers dropped by 96% compared to the same time last year. According to the Port Authority, bridge and tunnel car traffic fell by more than 60%. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy is pitching a borrowing plan to help make up for billions of dollars of lost revenue in the current and next budget amid a virus-induced lockdown. The New Jersey COVID-19 Emergency Bond Act outlined in draft legislation seen by Bloomberg would authorize the Murphy administration to issue general obligation bonds. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. Coming up to 6:10 on Wall Street, time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
All right, good morning, Nathan. The Pro Sports League is continuing to plan for possible returns. Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred told the Associated Press they got to be ready to go as soon as public health officials give them the okay. And yesterday, they all got the okay from an important person. Dr. Anthony Fauci did an interview on Snapchat and said sports leagues should return, but without fans and with constant testing of players. First active NFL player to test positive, L.A. Rams center Brian Allen. The NFL will reportedly release its 2020 schedule in about 3 weeks, but they are building in virus-related contingencies. And an NFL draft that'll be unlike any other starts a week from tonight, not in Las Vegas as it was supposed to be, but from Bronxville. And Roger Goodell's basement. New Giants coach Joe Judge will also be in his basement.
I'm not looking to make this a vacation for anybody. We've got a lot of serious work to get done. But it is still our house, and like everyone else in America is finding out, everyone's working with their family, always present, and that's pretty true for us. I got a golden retriever sits on the couch next to me for about 15 hours a day. So, right now she could probably tell you more about who we're going to take in the first round than anybody else.
Well, maybe the golden retriever knows what the Giants will do with the fourth pick next Thursday night. Maybe Clemson pass rusher Isaiah Simmons or an offensive lineman. Jets have the 11th pick. The WNBA draft tomorrow. New York Liberty with the first pick will almost certainly take the Oregon star Sabrina Ionescu. The Liberty just made a big trade. They sent their best player, Tina Charles, to Washington. 3-way deal with Detroit. The Liberty got back 2 players and 3 more first-round draft picks. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, despite the pandemic, DraftKings is driving ahead with plans to go public through a reverse merger. The Boston-based gaming and fantasy sports company agreed in December to a 3-way deal with gaming tech provider SB Tech and Diamond Eagle Acquisition. The plan values DraftKings at $3.3 billion. Diamond Eagle shareholders are scheduled to vote on the deal a week from today. This is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school.
Because you can't watch Trolls World Tour at the cinema, Sky Store is bringing the cinema home to you with Sky Store Premiere.
I'm going to destroy all music, except for rock!
We need to unite the trolls to save all music.
Our brand new service that lets you watch movies at home that would normally be in the cinema.
Rock and roll!
Let's go save the world!
Yeah! Prepare for battle. This ought to be good. Enjoy Trolls World Tour now on Sky Store Premiere, bringing the cinema to you.
This is the sound of Otto Sergey finding you a better energy deal.
No more, please.
You please.
While you get on with your life, Otto Sergey constantly searches the energy market. He will let you know when you could save, and then switching is up to you. Sergey, hurry up! You better not use all the hot water!
Coming! Look.
Automate your energy with Otto Sergey. Compare the market. Keep life simple.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Here's Rishad Salamat.
Hong Kong schools, of course, been closed since late January, and there seems to be little hope that classes will be resuming soon amid the coronavirus. Let's discuss the issues now with the Hong Kong Education Secretary, Kevin Young. How long do these schools stay closed?
It's now difficult to tell because the safety or the health of our students is always our first priority. So at this stage, we're still monitoring closely.
Okay, so what needs to change for you to actually change your policy here?
We always say that we need to consider a few factors before we could consider school resumption. Basically, it's the sort of the general situation. As I said, the coronavirus, which is we rely a lot on the professional health advisors. And the other two issues that we need to consider are the preparedness of the school, whether the schools are at a stage of well prepared for the resumption of the classes. And finally, we need to ensure that there will be ample supply of epidemic prevention materials or supplies in the market.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by Interactive Brokers. They charge margin loan rates from as low as 0.75% to 1.55%. Rates subject to change. Restrictions apply. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. And we have this headline that we've been watching from Apple. Sources telling Bloomberg that Apple's developing over-ear wireless headphones with parts that can be swapped in and out, seeking to augment its AirPods business with a high-end audio product. Shares of Apple are higher this morning, up 1.3% in early trading. BlackRock reported flat earnings in the first quarter, even as the coronavirus pandemic alarmed investors and triggered a rapid sell-off. Net inflows were $35 billion in the period. That compares with $65 billion in the same period a year earlier. S&P futures are higher this morning, up 12 points. Dow futures up 75. NASDAQ futures up 66. The DAX in Germany's up 0.9%. The 10-year Treasury is up 1/32. The yield 0.62%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.19%. NYMEX crude oil up 2.1% or 41 cents at $20.28 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.9% or $16.20 at $17.5640 an ounce. The euro 1.0869 against the dollar. The yen 107.74. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, President Donald Trump threatened to try to force both houses of Congress to adjourn. It would be an unprecedented move that would likely raise a constitutional challenge so that he can make appointments to government jobs without Senate approval. Spain today reported almost 5,200 new coronavirus infections, the highest in 1 week. New guidelines